I remember like what was it? Like 2013 maybe to 20.
Go way back.
2013 to 2020. Like what would you say that era is? Like I'm talking about like pure like content creator. Everybody was a production company, hustle culture. I think a lot of people watching probably know exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah.
If they're past a certain age. I mean, there's definitely probably younger viewers that are like, and there's probably older viewers that maybe miss. I don't know. I feel like it got pretty. It infected the culture pretty heavily. But I mean, I'm talking like Casey Neistat, like Gary Vaynerchuk, like all of the like start a company, be an entrepreneur.
That's right. Yeah,
that was like the hot. I mean, it was literally the trendy thing for a good 7-year period there.
Yeah, and I think you're right. The 2013.
And I think it ended with COVID. It kind of like was the, I'm not going to say like the formal end, but it after COVID, things felt a little different after that period of a couple of years. And now we're kind of finding something else.
I wonder too, let's not spend a bunch of time on this, but I wonder too if COVID and the introduction of remote work allowed people to enjoy their jobs a little bit more and maybe say to themselves, well, now I don't feel as motivated to start my own thing or do it my own way because I kind of have the best of both worlds. I have the stability of a full-time job, benefits, salary, etc. But I'm working remotely, even if it's partial remote and partial in the office. And like it took the edge off. It made me feel more comfortable doing what I'm doing. So not as many people were seeking those outlets of toxic hustle culture and entrepreneurism and all that kind of stuff because they just kind of chilled out about it.
I think like one of the key, I kind of want to define terms here too, like hustle culture, because it's almost become culturally popular to, push back against hustle culture or whatever that is. I don't think hustle culture was ever the issue. You've always had people that are workaholics or not workaholics or whatever. But I think it was more so you had a lot of people that were essentially sold this idea that they can't be happy unless they do this, this, and this. And a lot of times that meant picking something out of like, some arbitrary thing that then they were going to be an entrepreneur at.
Right.
And then investing all of this time and resource into making that your thing.
Yeah.
And then like, oh, you got to grind your face off and do this and do that. And you're going to be successful. And I think like you had a lot of people that bought into that. And the secret has always been, the secret, there's no secret.
I know, right.
But the thing has always been like, you find something you love and then you do that thing.
Right. Yeah.
And I know that's definitely, it's oversimplifying things, but you find what you really like and then you do that thing. And some people were doing that and starting things. And, I'm sure there's a lot of people that started things, but what do you feel like did you feel like you got caught up in it or?
Definitely. I mean, I was listening to Vaynerchuk. I was listening to, all those podcasts and the content that was coming out around it. And part of why I even started a YouTube channel was it was kind of part of the playbook. I mean, it was something that I was interested in just personally because I've always been messing around with cameras and filming myself or talking or whatever. And so it seemed natural to me, like it made sense. Well, if you want to, make yourself known on a larger stage than just in your city or region, make a YouTube channel. It doesn't have to be about what you do. It could be about whatever. And if people like you and discover you, they might go, well, that guy makes videos. Well, I want him to make a video for me. So definitely. I mean, I don't know that I went so hard as to, work 18 hours a day and, like all that kind of stuff. But I definitely got into that stuff and I was listening to the gurus and trying to experiment with how to price stuff and, making content around it and what content I was posting and sort of like hearing from the experts, And I think, again, this sort of symbolizes too, because that carried through with my YouTube channel to a certain extent, but just kind of got to a point where I'm like, I don't want to follow all these rules. And
Yeah.
like, oh, you got to, if you want to make videos like that, you got to start a second channel, or, oh, you can't do that. Or if you're going to work with brands, you got to do it this way or whatever. I'm like, I'm just going to kind of do what feels best to me instead of what
everybody's trying to sell you their recipe. Yeah.
Like this prescription for success. And I'm like, well, you know, yeah. And don't get me wrong, like nothing crazy. And it was during a time where I think sponsorship money was much more abundant for smaller YouTubers and all that stuff. But I had a couple surprisingly good years after I had that initial growth during the pandemic on my channel. And then when I did shift to more doing what I wanted and what I felt, you know, it fell off a little bit. There's other factors at play. It's not just sort of like I blew things up and paid the price financially, but you know, I go back to, you talked about, you know, find the one thing you love and do it. I brought this up.
Several things you love.
Yeah. Especially in my case. But I brought up a while back on the podcast, The Power of Myth by Joseph Campbell, a series that Bill Moyers did for PBS, where he had these in-depth studio sessions essentially with Joseph Campbell, who's like the leading expert, or the most, you know, like studied, but dedicated his whole life to understanding how humanity is linked through the stories we tell, whether it's mythology, religious stuff, movies, you know, whatever. And he always came up with this phrase, follow your bliss. And man, did that punched me in the face. We've talked, obviously, in the podcast, things that you hear that just kind of unlock things or whatever. And I have taken that my whole life. And even the entrepreneurial stuff and listening to that, like there was an element of following my bliss to going down those rabbit holes.
Yeah.
But when you do that and you start sort of stacking some negatives, or you're like, that feels a little toxic to me, or I don't really like that, it doesn't work for me, whatever, you know, your bliss evolves.
It was totally like, looking back on it, it totally feels like it was like, I mean, it almost feels a lot more culty now looking back at it. Just, I mean, people were completely bought in.
Yeah.
Like, didn't even realize it was a lens that they were putting on everything.
Yeah.
I mean, the hustle culture, like, yeah, entrepreneur in your bio nonsense was massive. There's still people that do it. Sure. Like, there's still people that are.
Well, and I think that's part of the democratization of all these tools of communication. Lends itself toward cult followings, because we are, as people, prone to those deep emotional connections to things, and things including people. So you talk about a cult movie, it's got a cult following. Cult of personality is a phrase we use, of course. And obviously, actual religious cults, or cults that are, you know, getting people to do things that are, you know, mass suicide, you know, whatever. But so it runs the gamut. Even you could argue that there's, I don't want to, like a cult following for Final Cut Pro. Like I'm like super dedicated.
Products.
I mean, Apple sweatshirts up here on the wall. Like I develop strong emotional connections to things, and you know, I have to be careful. There's another great quote, Fight Club. You know, the stuff you own ends up owning you.
Yeah.
So we have to watch out for this stuff. The people that you prescribe, or that you listen to or look up to, like you got to watch out that what they think or what they teach doesn't end up taking over your life, and it's not really truthful to who you are or what you want to do.
It's so important to, I feel like culturally, part of the reason that we succumbed so much to these things is culture for the last 25, this is a half-assed theory, by the way. Alex's half-assed theories.
Hot take.
Culture for like the last 25, 30 years has been the internet.
Yeah.
And so I think that it almost parallels the age. So, you know, in 2014, we're, you know, the, you know, primary internet you could think was like a 14-year-old. It's not a perfect, you know, but people were using the internet in a way that they hadn't quite figured that out yet.
Right.
And so I think, you know, you kind of fall into these things where it's like, oh, I'm all in. And that becomes the only way you see the world.
Yeah.
And one thing that I think this might just be me, projecting this, but I hope the world as a whole, or at least like the West, the United States, whatever, just a lot of the drivers of culture or internet culture, whatever that is, like, are kind of learning to start to look inward a little bit. I know that sounds really, but I mean that in the sense of having an opinion on something because that's how you feel about it.
Right.
Not because...
That's exactly right.
Not because you're trying to be a part of a group or do
you're
something.
Virtue signaling, or
100%.
You're fabricating an external representation that's more favorable. It's like sorry for the movies, but the Matrix, they call it like the digital image of your own self.
You're totally trying to just, signal to other people, and you have no feelings on it one way or another. I feel like we're hopefully reaching a point where there is more of a premium put on having ideas that are your own, and it's still tough because everybody's so plugged in.
It had been a golden afternoon, and I remember having the familiar conviction that life was beginning over again with the summer.